Well, thank you, Bobby, for being here with us. I'm here with Bobby Smith. He's worship pastor at Johnson Ferry Church in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Mm-hmm. He's also an Emmy-award winning composer, music producer, singer, songwriter, performer. You wear many hats.
Acrobat, gymnast.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
But also, husband and father to 2 children.
That's right.
So very busy again, lots of hats. So tell us a little bit more about, at least some of those hats, about your work in the church. What does the life and ministry of Bobby look like these days?
It's crazy. So, I'll tell you kind of where I came from, where I'm at, maybe where I'm going. That'd be helpful. So I'm Florida kid, came from Pensacola. It's a great little beach town. If anybody's been there, it's the best beaches on the planet. You're like, but, I kind of grew up in the church. Remember my first solo singing was Lord, You Are More Precious Than Silver. My mom had to go to the family Christian bookstore or whatever and find the tape with the right key for me to sing in. The days of the cassette tape. What a dedicated mom. But I love music. Right off the bat, I started piano lessons when I was a really little kid. Always loved kind of going off script, which is maybe the theme of life a little bit. It's just going a little bit off script.
Surprising.
I know. But I really loved creating my own songs. Even back then, my teacher kind of was smart enough not to wrangle me and force me to just play the Bach, which I love Bach now. But I think when I was 7, 8, 9, I just really liked making fun sounds. And so she helped kind of tailor that, and that helped cultivate the love for music. That as I started getting to high school and playing with friends and bands, and I started getting more serious, started taking voice lessons. Oh, I could really do this. I started leading some worship in that era. It was probably in the middle of high school that God really got a hold, though, of my heart and a calling towards using music for something more than just, making a lot of money and being famous, which are 2 big driving forces for the artist industry, right? Money and fame. And
can you talk more about that calling time? When you were sensing God kind of pushing you in certain directions, or what did you see, or what factors helped you kind of come to that realization, especially the high schooler? Yeah,
well, so, I think part of it is just the real testimony to following Jesus in the midst of high school. I think I was drawn always towards the crowds, towards just being the life of the party, that kind of guy. And it was middle of high school that we switched churches, actually. Started really hearing about who God was, how he loved me through Christ, what the gospel was. And I think just on a core soul level, I just realized the need to follow him fully. I think there's just that realization that if you were going to do this, we're going to do this for real. And that's really what I kind of felt, and wound up going on mission for the first time to Brazil when I was a summer of my junior year of high school. I think I saw people that had true needs. I've really shared my faith for the first time actively, and saw people come to Christ and say, yeah, I want that. And I think that just made me hungry just for, I just know this is worth everything. And, I wasn't really sure how that would flesh itself out with my career. I knew music was kind of taking the top notch. I really love the visual arts and all that. So I was like, what do I do with that? And that's when Samford kind of came into play. And my pastor at that church that we switched to had come from Samford. I heard so many good things about it. I remember visiting here, and I came with my dad, and this is a fun fact of life, and this is probably not a recommendation to any student who ever watches this. But I filled out all the applications for other colleges, and I didn't turn them in. I only turned in Samford.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Maybe not so recommended.
But I just kind of knew I wanted to be here. I got in. I was a music major, and the real shift, I think I still wrestled with can I just use all those giftings, and can I be the guy at the Emmy-Awards who's like, thank you, God? Mm-hmm. Or is there something more like vocational ministry that I need to do? And kind of the story that brings it to life for me is doing a Disciple Now event, which is, just these weekend retreats where they really push evangelism, really push a relationship with God to students. Well, this church where my life had got turned upside down by the Lord asked me to come back. I had a band at that time. They asked me to come and lead that D Now and lead the worship there. And I said, sure, of course. And it was the Friday night of that event, and it was just passionate, explosive night of just ministry and worship. And my parents happened to be there. And my dad, who is a stoic dude, he's not an emotional guy. Yeah. He comes up, tears in his eyes, just telling me, Bobby, I've seen you perform all over the place, but I've never seen you like that.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to cry because this is my dad, who I've not really seen cry, telling me how proud he is and how just authentic he saw what God was doing in my life there. And I think that was a real turning point from just wanting to kind of, advocate God from a musical platform to really spending my life musically for the Lord. Yeah. But it didn't mean that I gave up all of a sudden, all the other things. And I think that's probably the coolest theme, as we're kind of getting into the now, because I went into ministry right out of college. I went to go work for a church, but I never stopped doing the commercial music side of things, the songwriting, all the other things, bands, all that. Mm-hmm. And they kind of started going together hand in hand. Yeah. And it was here, I worked at a church, Shades Mountain Baptist Church. It's up the street from here, doing about 5 or 6, 7 jobs. I did I was the middle school, high school, college. Yes. Yeah. Well, and it was right before the recession hit in 2008. And so I was really grateful because I signed the papers for the job. And it was a month later, things just went crazy. Yeah. And so very grateful. And I got married to my wife in that season right out of college. Mm-hmm. And we both had a job at this church. So we were really grateful. But, it probably wasn't the most sustainable job when you're doing multiple things. But for 22, 23 years old, I was amped just to be able to, because I was doing music and I was doing recording, because this is a large, well-resourced church, which, is kind of a dream. We know that that's not always the local church. We know that sometimes you have to do a lot with a little, but this just happened to be a church that had a lot that I was able to learn and grow from, on how to build a recording studio, how to use recording software, learning the different names of microphones, all that stuff, while at the same time cultivating a student worship band, learning what it means to craft a set list that doesn't just have my favorite songs in it, but actually leads people somewhere, getting an exposure to a greater body of believers and leading a big church, which is intimidating, but needed for me to just kind of go through that. Yeah. But it was good. That was a formative time.
Yeah. Can you talk more about, like you said, you've never left that, we'll call it the commercial side of things, that doesn't necessarily situate itself naturally in the church, although there's a lot of connections to church and ministry there. And I've heard you talk about kind of some learning points from kind of that side of things. But for some people, whether they are worship leaders themselves or just simply worshipers, they do feel that dichotomy between, there's this whole world of music and art out there, but this is the church and it's sacred and it's kind of holy other. And I don't want to deny that there is something holy other about that setting, especially being that God is present, especially present in that moment. But, how do we kind of minimize some of those dichotomies or kind of blend some of those worlds so that we don't see, that kind of world as wholly separate? And I think there's some lessons there even, if you want to go even further with how all of us we all have these lives that are outside the church.
That's right.
And so, how do we bring those aspects of our lives, not necessarily, or not just into the church, but how have you blended those roles and those experiences?
Great question. You're very good at this, so thank you. I think there's a lot of scripture that speaks to this, to be in the world, but not of the world, to, I think, be a student of culture, but not just susceptible to every whim that comes its way. I think you just take a look back in history and you look at bar tunes and stuff like that were, I think redeemed in many ways by hymn writers and things like that, who would use these common phrases and musical melodies and then kind of redeem them with sacred text. I think that's a really cool thing. If we really believe all good gifts, James chapter 1, come from the Father, right? Mm-hmm. That just means those things that we're drawn to many times musically, production-wise, things that really kind of stir us up. like those can be great things, and ones that we shouldn't shy from. Because like you said, I mean, God didn't call us to live a non-integrated life. We're not supposed to, I mean, this is the thing you tell a middle schooler, right? Don't be different on Saturday than you are on Sunday. Yeah. You want the Monday through Saturday to look the same way as church on Sunday. You just want to have a fully developed following of Jesus. Yeah. And so I think like, for me, it just is not divorcing my faith from any kind of musical endeavor that I put my hand to. I want to do everything with excellence. Also want to have that aroma of Christ. You know, we went to this worship event last night with your ensemble, which was really, really cool to be a part of. And one of the things as you entered was this laying out of all these different spices that we were inspired. Like as you leave, you know, maybe you tread over that and just the aromas that you smell kind of represent the aroma of Christ as you go out. And I think that for me, being in music industry world is a very exciting thing for me to just look and feel different maybe than what they're used to. Yeah. And to bring some of that into that. And certainly I get all the benefits of interacting and partnering and collaborating with some of the top creatives of the world. Like they blow my mind, some of the things, briefs that I get from top Fortune 500 companies where they've really intentionally thought through their brand and their marketing and their thoughts and their musical desires. I mean, man, I hope I have that same kind of desire for what I'm bringing into our worship services and our events and our programs. Like, yeah, it's amazing how they can really work together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good word. Have you ever received any pushback in the church, and not necessarily your church, but just from Christians in general who maybe don't understand why you'd put energy into that very creative side of your work?
I mean, I think everybody has a certain amount of bandwidth. And, you know, for me being, you know, full-time, you know, salaried church staff guy, just being really careful to honor you know, the church and, you know, in that time, I think that's important. So I haven't really had any pushback. I mean, if anything, I think I've been blessed to be with leaders, with pastors, on church staffs that really value a kingdom vision for ministry. Certainly we know that that's not the case everywhere. I mean, there's just some work environments, there's some church environments where this is it. This is what you need to be focused on. And I just have not happened to be in those. I've had ones that have really encouraged me to just keep the pulse in all sorts of areas because I think they see that could only help the church. And I think if it became a hindrance, we all know that when you just know that you're kind of making an idol out of something, you're spending too much time on something, you're detracting from what your calling is, whatever it might be. Yeah, that's an unhealthy place to be. But no, I have not encountered somebody really pushing back on that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good word too. And just even knowing that might not be reality everywhere too. I think. I mean, you've been serving the church for a long time now, actually. I mean, not that you're, you know, old by any means, Bobby, but I mean, right out of college, you started serving the church. I think you've been at Johnson Ferry for 10 years. Is that right?
That's right.
Now?
Yep.
So kind of walk us through what is a week in the life of Bobby's ministry at Johnson Ferry look like now? And again, I know that you kind of wear many hats. You've got a large team that you work with and serve with there. But yeah, what's a week look like?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a dynamic church. So, you know, like you said, like a lot of hats and weeks look different, but I think there's patterns for a week. There's things that just got to get done, you know. What I love that one of my bosses and mentors said is those Sundays just keep coming around, you know. It's like every 7 days they're there. And so you're really trying to do your best to prepare mentally, spiritually, and then, you know, programmatically, all these things to make sure Sunday is a really fruitful time for the whole church. So with that comes, you know, planning and preparation. So for us, you know, we're using Planning Center as a major hub, which a lot of churches use, a great resource just to staff our services with all of our audio, lighting, video needs, kind of a modern church where it has all those elements to it. All of our bands and our singers and our worship leaders, and sometimes our choir, which we call our sing team. That's a fun thing we can talk about later. But yeah, so there's some good elements to planning that are maybe weeks out for that are getting. We try to keep that rolling at least 2 to 3 months out, so people kind of know where they are. We just have a lot of I don't know where everybody else lives, but ours, just people seem to be very busy. maybe to our detriment. We're just busy folks.
Yes.
And so getting things scheduled out is really a good service for them and for me to just make sure that we're being a good steward of their time. Then it's planning, worship, try to keep that few weeks out at least where we're crafting sets based upon, what our sermon series are in, what our pastor's directions desiring, if there's any kind of church-wide emphasis that we're moving towards, all the things that should be common sense when you're intentionally trying to plan worship in the church, what is going along with what you're doing. So charting, getting MP3s, trying to make sure things are in the right key. So just as many
details.
Yeah, as many plot holes that we can avoid as possible, that would be important. And so Mondays, I spend a lot of time with our executive staff team. So we're talking big picture with the church, with kind of our key leaders in missions and in administration and in discipleship and our senior pastor. So I'm spending time there. We review Sunday services, which is really good. We kind of look back and then we also look forward, what's coming up. Tuesdays are a good day to prep. We have rehearsals on Tuesday nights for our space, so we'll be prepping for that. We cater and we get a meal together with our band beforehand, so just preparing them for a later night that night and being intentional with that time with our band. Wednesdays, those are all over the map because Wednesdays are a pretty busy time in the life of churches, at least in the Bible Belt, and so Wednesdays typically have all sorts of student programming. So we do coffee houses, which are really fun. Okay. That's something that came out of COVID. Because we're like, we got to do something. And so we actually wound up doing open mic and creating a platform. When there was no live music in the middle of COVID, we found a way to safely do live music. And it really became like a key point for us. And so coffee houses are great. We do those once a month, and then middle school worship as well, and helping some of the people on my team prepare for that. It's been really cool to see that continue to flourish and grow. Thursdays are like your catch.
Yeah, what needs to be done?
What's got to get done? Because, Sunday is coming, and we, typically for our staff, Fridays, Saturdays are a weekend rather than Saturday, Sunday, because Sunday is on. And so Friday, Saturday, we're off, just enjoying family, having Sabbath. The important thing is I do have a wife, 2 kids, just putting that time in there. Very good. And then Sunday comes and it's an early call time. We have multiple services. We can talk about this more, but we're a church with 2 styles of worship. So we have the traditional and a modern worship service. I'm pastoring the modern side. So just preparing all the aspects for that for Sunday.
Can you talk more? So we do work with a lot of students who, long to embrace kind of both sides and everything in between. In terms of there's this traditional and part of our work is to intentionally expose students to kind of that entire spectrum.
Cool.
As you know, sometimes that dynamic when there's kind of 2 very distinct services is a really healthy one in a church that, again, can expose worshipers to a variety of expressions and impression, form worshipers in different but meaningful ways. At other times, it can be contentious because, I remember yesterday you were talking about preferences and just, how kind of our opinions might get in the way of what's more important. But just talk to us about, that dynamic as you've experienced it. Maybe the good and the bad. If there isn't even, not trying to assume that there's bad, but, just...
We're human, so there's bad.
Usually there is at some point.
That sin nature just keeps coming out.
But
think about
how does that play out?
So we have, do you know the Austin Stone? You've heard of that church? So Aaron Ivy's the worship pastor there. Got a chance to just spend time with him, and we kind of took from him and added our own little spin, but we have 11 values of a worshiping team. And one of them is relationship over rivalry. And so, at the end of the day, we are the body of Christ. We are brothers and sisters. There's a reason God uses that language to describe us. We are co-heirs with Christ. We are now members of one household. We are adopted sons and daughters. And if we lose kind of that, we are done. We are sunk, because then rivalry is the only thing that's going to start creeping in, because preference is so natural for us. We all, it's like, look at your playlist on your phone. Like, what songs you like.
Culturally trained.
Yes.
That way.
Well, and more now than ever, you can have it your way in every regard. I mean, we have instant access to whatever movies we want, whatever. I mean, like our lighting, we can change it with like just saying, Alexa, like change my lights, you know, like we can do so much that is crafted towards us. And so to get this familial like understanding, like we are in this for the kingdom and we are just members that belong to one another, that we are accountable to one another. That's a big deal. So, you know, something that's been really fruitful and healthy is the person that hired me at Johnson Ferry. His name's Mark Cottingham. I mean, he's like a father, but he's also just a friend and a brother. And I love him. And the love that is there, because he leads our traditional service and I lead our modern, even as we've seen the pendulum shift of attendance patterns and just kind of desires and preference in our own address. When I came in 2011 to Johnson Ferry, I mean, it was probably somewhere like 52-48 traditional, like more people going, and now it's, you know, I don't know, more like 65-35 modern. I mean, it's a big shift attendance pattern wise. And that could have easily elicited all that. And his, not only humility, but his Christ-likeness and just, man, we're same team. And something that we were even talking about a little bit yesterday was just understanding the why before we get to the what. And so like, why do we worship? What is our theology of worship? What is it that is important to keep calling out in us as a church and pastoring people to look beyond preference? Because I mean, say you're an elder in the church and you have a very big preference for this kind of anthem-driven choir thing, but you know you need to be like one hand reaching down to that next generation. You're going to have a different kind of mindset if you know you're intentionally giving up what you crave for the sake of the next generation. And I would hope that then is taught to that generation to do the same thing for the next, because if there's anything that I feel like I'm learning, and I'm short time in ministry, I've been full-time ministry maybe 14, 15 years. But that pendulum shifts a lot. I mean, who knew choir was going to make such a return? You know, as strongly as it has in the past, you know, couple years, but it has. It looks different, but it's still choir. And I think that if you don't get attached to the what as much, and you can really get to the why we worship, what is our goal, what is our desire to just stir up the saints, you know, for the work of ministry, to just remind themselves of their calling, their first love in Jesus. Well, that's going to be what translates. So it helps definitely soften the blow, but people still have preferences. And there's some rough spots when we're trying to choose arrangements, and there's still going to be complaints. It's too loud, even though, you know, you might hold a decibel meter up to a full out antiphonal organ, you know, all the pipes are wide open. That might be just as loud as an electric guitar, but the timbre, the sound of a guitar just sounds different.
No. And I mean, one thing I really appreciate, just the kind of the relational capacity and that needs to be developed. And I mean, that I think you're really gifted in, obviously, but that really helps, you know, those kinds of transitional moments or just the dynamics of those relationships to really flourish in ways that are important. I mean, that goes back to, you know, being a pastor is so much, not necessarily so much more than the what, but like you've indicated, the why and kind of just the people aspect of ministry.
There's something different when you're like sitting across from somebody, you're looking them in the eyes, and you're like, I love you. You're my sister in Christ. I want to get there with you. You know, I want to talk about this with you, as opposed to nowadays, I mean, we're so comfortable just saying what we feel through the anonymity of the internet and just kind of the reality of a virtual life, especially COVID accentuated some of that. And I think just reminding ourselves like this is important, and this helps soften that blow, because when you're going to have a different understanding when you are relationally just, aware of somebody else right there. And you see somebody, the last thing I want to do if someone is really heartbroken that, like seminary, I read this book called Who Stole My Church? And it's a narrative fiction that a guy who's a pastor for many years wrote, but based on his real life experiences. And that whole line comes from when he's this new pastor, and they've mostly an aging congregation, and this sweet little old lady, when he's meeting with them on Sunday nights to work through transition, she just says, I just need to know who stole my church. Yeah. And, him using that as just a talking point of how important it is to meet people where they are relationally and help pastor them, shepherd them towards what is the end goal, what is the end game for us as a church, and helping pastor people through preference. Never going to be able to.
That can be hard work too.
Yeah.
I mean, just pastoring people through the long term, and because the church does change. I mean, and that's going to be inevitable, but change is not easy for most of us
in any regard ever. I don't like when my wife will move furniture in my house. You can ask her; she's just so annoyed with me because she'll move a chair. I'm like, why did you change that? But it's just we don't handle change well.
It's hard. Yeah.
It's disruptive.
That's a good word. Yeah. Talk to me more about, again, just kind of building on your relational building, as part of your work. And I know from your own ministry that, young people are a really critical part of your work. You are a gifted mentor, as these students attest to young people and, seeing them through the really formative teenage years into their college years and kind of helping faith be a vital part of their life during that time.
Yeah.
How did that come about? That I can speak for myself. That is not a natural gift that I would say that I have, working with teenagers.
You don't love sixth graders? Come on.
Yeah, I love them. But right.
No, I get it.
I would say for most of us, probably that time is, forming people in that time doesn't come as naturally as it seems to you. So how do you think, that role in your ministry, I'm assuming, and you can clarify that maybe that was not something you intentionally set out to be a part of your ministry, but how has it become part of your work? And how do you see your role as a worship pastor to also be, forming young people and young worshipers?
It's a great question. And honestly, it's hard to put your finger on. For real. I think one of the easiest things, and you kind of know me and have seen this, I'm like a giant child myself. So, I want to speak maturely. I want to be real with this. But at the end of the day, I think I have a little bit of a kid's heart, and that's been something that and necessity. When first hired out of college, my job was middle school, high school, college. So you're just around these students. A lot of college grads, that's what going to be where if you want to do ministry, you're going to be a student pastor before you maybe are a senior pastor, and you're going to work with student music before you're leading the whole church in music. It's a helpful, growing field, and there's a little bit less pressure in terms of you can move that speedboat a little bit better than the cruise ship. You can try some things and experiment and just be able to just do things that you wouldn't be able to do, with a big church sometimes. I don't know. But the reality is, I think it's just having love for the people that you're pastoring. That's the important part is worship, pastor. I hope that I really have a heart, just like Jesus had a heart for any and all. And that I don't discount a sixth grader or seventh grader because they're a sixth grader or seventh grader. I think I also am keenly aware of how annoying I was when I was in sixth grade. Truly, my voice hadn't changed. I was asking obnoxious questions. I know myself. Yeah. And I think that that's a healthy thing for any person to remember. Same thing with not being too pious, right? Remembering, oh, wretched man that I am, trapped in this body of death, right? This idea that, man, we are sinners saved by grace helps you pastor these sinners a lot better because you don't become holier than thou. So that helps me with students, just seeing where they are, just like Jesus meets us where we are, and maybe help disciple where they should or could be. And some of it's identifying, seeing gifts, talents, but even just passion, heart, and just, putting gasoline on that. Yeah. And identifying those people, and then just being present. You have kids, I have kids. I don't think the tool to being a great dad or a great mom is necessarily always in all the techniques and the way we handle every situation. It's a lot of times being there, being a present person in their life that is available to them. Certainly we have things how we utilize that time, but it's a lot harder when you're not there. And so just being open to students. And then I feel like it's just, from that point, it's just, what are they passionate about? And help them see if the things that they're passionate about can be redeemed, there's a reason why that is here. Let me show you what God intends for these things. Help them get perspective, because obviously we know when we're teenagers, it's like Romeo and Juliet. Like, I would rather die than not be with this person. Or just we're very passionate. Just help funnel and fuel that into what I think God intended for those passions for His glory. I love that Piper quote, that God is most glorified in us. We're most satisfied in Him. So if I can stir that up in a student, not only through me exampling it, like, am I most satisfied in Christ? Like is He really my daily bread or not? And then helping shift where, to me, I feel like if you give a student an opportunity just to be open and vulnerable about what they care about, they will tell you. Mm-hmm. And then you can really get through a little bit more of just asking. You can get way more than telling. Mm-hmm. And so I think, and through the asking, you get a lot more platform to then tell and show. Yeah. And so then, and it just doesn't hurt for me with music. I have a platform that I can instantly give them skills and abilities and, honestly, avenues to grow. Mm-hmm. It's just amazing how that then just cultivates and builds up. And then, I mean, to me, not just keeping them in student world, but finding ways to bridge that into our main worship, to other avenues of our church. You know, I don't want to just be worship guy and I only think worship minded. Like, is there other ways they could serve? Do I need to get them on a mission trip and see them, you know, just growing in their faith and connecting with other mentors, whatever it looks like? I think it's just keeping eyes open to what would help grow them.
I mean, I just find that so impressive, because I don't feel like it's natural in many settings. And again, you seem to embody it naturally in terms of bridging that gap between worship ministry, which is oftentimes working mostly with adults, right? Or at least, you know, 20-something and above, and student ministry, which oftentimes, and not exclusively, is so focused on the teenage years. Yep. And you know, many churches, you know, these programs are pretty separate, and it is hard for the adults to kind of capture or, you know, be won over by this vision that you've laid out, that, you know, students can be mentored in such meaningful ways by adults in the church, but then can be brought on to the adult ministries even of the church. I mean, do you have any kind of maybe straightforward words of advice or any approaches that you found really helpful, especially for the church, I would say, that is struggling to see how that gap can even be bridged? Maybe for, you know, there's a lot of time, sometimes issues when they're meeting, when this is going on, it doesn't work. And there's just a lot of logistics to kind of handle in terms of bringing teenagers so that they know that they are a full member and full worshiper in the full body of the church.
Practical. I like practical. I mean, it's easy to get out here. Like, let's get right here. I mean, the reality is you can't be thinking 6 months out. You got to be thinking 6 years out. And so some of these students who might be freshmen, their skill set's not ready yet. Well, by the time they're a college sophomore and they're coming back as a home kid, I mean, they're well equipped, and you've put in the hard work to develop that, so they want to be bought in. Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many college students even that I have who are actively a part of our worship ministry that I had when they were 8th graders or freshmen. Yeah. There's a long game in mind that you're being intentional on the front end to see some of that. In the short term too, I think if you have, some of it is what do you have available to you? I mean, a lot of times the hindrance is that students aren't ready. And the distraction element is a very real part of church. Like, we want to do our best. We don't want to hinder people from worshiping. And you don't want to have like a pity service like here. But I think if you have a student who's ready, bringing him into worship, introducing him, like just proximity wise, you know, an adult choir member being with students, that's something right there. Yeah. You know, our sing team, that little choir I was talking about, is a mixture of our high school ensemble and our adult kind of like sing team crew. And it really is really commingling of those people, and it brings some shared love, because when they're worshiping together and they're working towards something together, it's amazing how that softens. Again, just relationship, just being near one another is helpful. I think crafting in a student service intentionally is not a bad thing. You know, just softening and making that student service not just serve students, but serve your church. So you're pastoring your students to think church-wide. So it's not just doing all their favorite songs. It's like, oh yeah, we're going to throw a hymn in here. Yeah, we're definitely going to, we're going to make, but it's, man, y'all are just going to be, it's powerful. So they see this, your adult kind of body sees the students like bringing something that they value and love. And then these adults are seeing these students and how they love music and serving the church. And you're just building more and more of those bridges for them to grow. And I think, honestly, as a worship pastor, the more we can do to not just banter in between songs but to just use transitional moments, to use the scripture we choose to help pastor people towards a bigger vision of worship that isn't just generational, but it's intergenerational. Mm-hmm. That's really, really helpful. I mean, I think that's a picture of heaven then again, we're all going to have heavenly bodies that just are probably awesome. And, who knows? But I do think that that's a real picture of the church now, is every tribe, tongue, and nation, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational, all that as a part of, just a picture of heaven. Yeah. And that'd be really, really cool.
Yeah. And it's inspiring too. I mean, sometimes it's hard to capture that vision here because we do find ourselves so divided at times, but sure. I'm just so inspired by your work and the work of Johnson Ferry more broadly that y'all are able to bridge that gap.
Trying.
And yeah, I mean,
all have a ways to go.
Work. Yeah, continuing to work to bridge that gap because it's very real in some congregations. I mean, that gap and just even in spite of efforts to want to close it, it can be hard at times.
Well, I think we're just like we have preferences, we also have territories. Right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm dealing with this right now. We have 2 gifted students, and their moms are actually major singers for us. And even seeing their moms, so I remember I told you about the 11 values that we have. Well, the last one is to be a relinquishing people, to give up what you crave. And so these moms, who we already schedule our bands out, we have multiple singers, so they might get a chance to sing once every 5 or 6 weeks because of just our number of people we have scheduled. And for them to give up their spot so their daughters can have a chance to lead. I mean, I just think it should be easier, obviously, for a mom to let their daughter lead. That's a big deal. But what if it's not your daughter? Mm-hmm. Do you still have that same mindset that's, I want to give up what I crave?
Right.
If it means that the kingdom is expanding. Like if it means that ultimately that God's getting the glory.
Yeah, I like that relinquishing idea too. I mean, I think that is at the heart of a lot of, bridging gaps of many sorts in the church.
Yep.
Probably, that's a good word for many of us.
Me too.
I want to go back to what you said earlier about kind of the what doesn't, or not that the what doesn't matter, but, it might not matter as much until you do know the why, kind of behind the goings on of the what's in worship. And I know that, so just back to your kind of bio, you studied music, you really started a career in music, but you went back to seminary and you studied the Bible and theology and church history and all those kinds of courses. How has that, first of all, what caused you to want to go to seminary and get that degree? And then how has that education and formation equipped you as a minister who is a minister, worship pastor, but a minister who uses music for the most part? But how has all of that ministry and pastoral training equipped you to do the work well as well?
Well, and I think that's a great question because not everybody, especially me, like contemporary worship pastor person, it's more and more rare to see a seminary degree. I know that. I know from my friends and my contemporaries that's just maybe not as much of a linchpin requirement that churches long for. Back when you talk to my boss, Mark Cottingham, like you can't get a job as a music minister without that seminary degree. And that's just not the case anymore. And for me, it would have been the most just lazy thing in the world for me to not go because at Johnson Ferry, where I worked, at the time that I was first starting there, they were the North Georgia hub for New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. So here I am at Johnson Ferry, classes would be down the hall. How could I not do this? Yes. Yeah. And fully funded. It was just one of the perks of being a staff member at this church, since we were the hub, that they just afforded that. So, right down the hall, free. I have no excuse. Yeah. And so I started immediately. I started right when I came on staff, I started. And I knew it was going to be good because I like school. I enjoy education. We remember our undergrad times. It's something that I really, really, I love. But I was nervous about what does seminary look like? Am I going to thrive, or is this going to be weird? Are these classes going to be relevant? I think that's a very important thing, that sometimes academics can be kind of separate from real life. And here I was doing both. And honestly, like, it was super formative for me. I really, really, really loved my time at seminary. I would say not all classes were created equal. Some were more relevant than others. But overall, the degree was really helpful in getting more of the why behind my what's. And I love that we're just using that. That's it, man. It was kind of these undergirdings that I knew I needed to find some more clarity and intentionality with, but this just gave me a framework. So whether it was theology of worship, systematic theology, I'm just trying to think some of the other really great classes that I took at spiritual formation 1 and 2. Like there's just some moments in there, and even some of my classmates. So one of them was a guy named Josh, who, we were just, I wouldn't say rivals. We were like, I said he was my nemesis, but we were like great friends. But we were both like really achievers, like trying to make it happen in these classes. And he's gone on to be one of the head people with the Gettys, doing all of their tours and booking and publishing. And so the connections that I made through seminary were really, really important, and love that. But then I can think of a specific moment even in seminary that was really good. They made us, for a project, take all of our set lists, like all of our liturgies for the last, 8 weeks or so. We had to take every single song and every single lyric line by line and put them through a theological grid. And then that would reveal to us, percentage-wise, with hard facts, what we are promoting to our people. What is it that we're teaching, doctrine and whatever that we're putting before our people, and how many songs there are. And so first thing I noticed is I was putting way too many songs in an 8-week period. I mean, it was just unreal. So there was really no anchors. It was almost always new songs. That was a problem. And then kind of where my biases lined up with what I liked in music, what songs I was drawn to. And it's not bad inherently, but I think for me, it was great to just take a step back and go, I think I could be better. And that, honestly, isn't that what education should do? As it should make us better. It takes what is already good and raw and refines. It's the refining fire to just make something even more come out. And to me, that's what seminary felt like. Was I came out on the other side more refined, more intentional, more thoughtful with my role as a pastor. And I feel like that's what seminary should be, and it was.
Yeah. Well, last minute here, what about, people who are students and young people who are thinking about leading the church through worship and maybe becoming worship pastor themselves? 1 minute of advice for them. I'm 20 years old. I think I'm called to be a worship pastor. What do I need to be doing now from a veteran like Bobby Smith?
Okay. Person, if you're watching, you made it this far through the interview, you're still here with us. This is it. This is the secret to success. How are you going to make it in life? Jesus, right? Middle school answer is Jesus, only Jesus, always only Jesus. This understanding of just passionately pursuing, John chapter 15, abiding in Christ, just as I and the Father are one, so also be one. I am the vine, you're the branches, abide in me, and I also in you. Like that is at the heart of what is going to drive you to being prayerful about that trajectory changing decision. Do I go to this church, this seminary, this city, that city? Do I marry this person? Do I pursue this thing? Do I bring this song into worship? Do I pursue this degree as a pastoral ministry? Like, you really need to have a thriving relationship with the Lord. It's just, what are we doing this for if it's not ultimately coming back to Christ and the work of the Spirit in you? And so I would say just have a devoted, real, thriving relationship with the Lord. And, all those wonderful Sunday school answers are tickets to that. You're spending daily time with Him. You're looking for somebody to not only pour into you, but for you to pour into. You are gathered with a body of believers. You make it a practice to be part of the local church, even if you're not on staff at one. And you're just looking for ways to look more and more like Jesus. I mean, I think, and hey, actually talk about him to people, right? That whole thing we're talking about of an integrated life with Jesus. So that'd probably be my big advice.
Yeah, well, that is another good word, Bobby. So thank you. So yeah, thanks to Bobby Smith here
Thank
being
you
with us, and thank you for joining us today.